everybody. We're starting a little bit late today, so I really appreciate people waiting. We had a couple of technical issues, but welcome to Enhancing Soft Skills in UX. Hello, everybody. I appreciate you waiting around. Honestly, appreciate the patience. Where is everybody coming from? That's what I want to know. I am currently in London, and we're experiencing a little bit of a heat wave, which we're not built for here. So where are you from and how's the weather doing where you are based? We have a wonderful panel on enhancing soft skills in UX from various experts in various different industries in UX. We have Mooj, we have Rebecca, we have Sunil, and we have Rachel as well. So a wonderful range of speakers for you today. Los Angeles, amazing. Well, it's always sunny there. So I'm going to add our speakers on stage at the moment. So just bear with me. And while I do that, just a big shout out to our sponsor, Zebra People. They are a UX specific recruitment company. So if you're looking to get hired, they're your people. Find them on LinkedIn or they may be in the chat right here. Amazing. Well, thank you also for our speakers for their wonderful patience for today, for being a bit of a late start. I'm going to take myself off stage and just get right into it. So see you guys in a bit. See you for the Q&A.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Rosie. And yeah, thanks to everyone for their patience. We got a good group going, it looks like, and it's going to be a great event. So let's kick things off. We will introduce ourselves and then talk a little bit about soft skills, a thorny subject despite its soft name. So I'll talk about myself first. So my name is Mujtaba, or Muj for short. I work for a company called Strike Partners. We're a global research and innovation consultancy. And my background is I'm an anthropologist, and I lead complex multi-market foundational UX projects. So that's research and strategy. For big tech companies. So I've done a lot of work with Meta, Reality Labs, Instagram. Right now I'm working for Google. I just want to say thanks again to Rosie and everyone on the UX Crunch team. So I've been to a few of their events here in London and online, and they're just fantastic. And it's great to be part of it. So let me hand it over. I'm going to go clockwise on my screen. So I'm going to hand it over to Rebecca.
Thanks. Hi. Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Rebecca. I am a content designer at a company called HubSpot, tech company based in the US, but with offices around the world. I live now in Glasgow, Scotland. And yeah, I wasn't always in UX. I came into this field from marketing and communications and sort of learned a lot of lessons along the way, which hopefully we'll get to talk about some of those things today.
Brilliant. So next up in my screen, I've got Sunil. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Butch. Hey, I'm Sunil. I currently work at Not on the High Street, which is a e-commerce brand in the UK, based in Richmond, which is super lovely. Lovely to go by the Thames. I'm a senior product designer there, and years before all this, I career changed from a life in retail in the Apple stores all over London and lots more.
Fantastic. And last but very much not least, let's get Rachel. And actually also, let's get everyone else. Everyone, please type about yourself in the chat. I want everyone to get a sense of the diversity of the group.
Hello everyone, I'm Rachel and I'm a lead product designer at a consultancy called Synchron, and we specialise in cloud, data and digital transformation in the financial services industry. And I've been there about 9 months. I've worked in a few different industries before that and various different scales of ventures as well, from startup to large enterprise. But across all these different places that I've worked, I've always found that building relationships with people that I work with has been one of the most impactful and rewarding parts of those jobs. And that's why I wanted to take part today, to talk about the soft skills that help you get by day to day and help build those strong relationships that help you achieve what you want to achieve.
Fantastic. Love it. Okay, cool. So let's maybe kick things off by defining, soft skills. So in UX, you've got your technical skills, which are, the sort of bits and bobs of actually, building things, what you're sketching. Maybe it's your Figma, maybe it's your Airtable skills for managing research data, what have you. And they're contrasted with soft skills. But interestingly, when, us speakers were sort of discussing things back and forth, Rebecca had a great point about that there's an issue with even calling them soft skills, that it's kind of implies that they're, I don't know, a bit flimsy compared with these technical skills. So already, this is open for debate. But I want to throw it around to Rebecca first and ask her what she thinks the most important soft skill is in her opinion.
Yeah, I definitely agree that, soft skills can kind of sort of devalue these a bit, and they're actually very important. I'd say the most important to me, and that I've sort of seen in my work, is curiosity. And that's really sort of this interest in learning. So a willingness to ask questions, to learn more yourself, or to question a decision, to find out how, like, why something happened, or why a design decision was made, or something like that. And so it's really sort of encouraging that conversation between you, your coworkers, and really making that a two-way conversation, but sort of leading with that curiosity. I think sort of encourages other people to really speak up and have dialogue around these decisions we're making at work.
Brilliant. Yeah, definitely agree. And then Rachel?
I would say the most important soft skill is listening. And I think that pairs really nicely with the curiosity that Rebecca just talked about. Because often when we talk about soft skills, we're referring to the communication skills. And when we're thinking about communication, we're thinking about the talking part of communication. But I guess communication comes in two parts. There's the talking, but then there's also the listening, and really listening comes first. And so comes first before talking. So I'd say that really listening to what someone else wants to say or is trying to tell you will always make what you respond with better and richer.
Fabulous. Yeah, I'm sure we've all been in situations, work meetings where it doesn't feel like a conversation, but feels like people kind of just waiting for their turn to monologue at each other. So yeah, absolutely agree about listening. I might add to that and say active listening. I think that's something we do a lot in UX research, is make sure that we're kind of prompting people and showing we're engaged and playing things back. So listening is not easy. Okay, cool. And then Sunil, please, I'd love to hear your favorite soft skill.
Yeah, I think my favorite is probably empathy. As a UX designer, we always get taught, obviously, to have empathy for our users, which is, goes without saying. But we also need to have empathy for our coworkers, whether that be our team in design or anyone in the business that we're working with or connected with in any kind of way. And I think it brings in a bit of that, active listening. It brings in curiosity as well. I think we all kind of jumbled all our stuff together.
Yeah, no doubt. Cool. There's some great stuff in the audience. Other people, there's Emerald, who's also a big fan of empathy. That's good to know. And loads of a kind of agreement there. So let's go into some kind of practical ways of talking about your soft skills, because a lot of us here in at these events, we're sort of building our careers, we're increasing our network. How do we kind of talk about soft skills? And I noticed Rebecca's got some ideas in this area, how to communicate this, because I believe your background is in kind of coaching people as well, right?
Yeah, so I do some career coaching and mentoring on the side, and this is definitely a really common question is, especially if you don't have a lot of experience in UX, what are you putting forward? What are you putting on your CV or your LinkedIn profile? And I think when you think about UX, we think about trying to get into the mind of the user. And so I think there's all sorts of, soft, or as I like to call them, foundational skills that you can highlight. There's the sort of empathy that we've said already, trying to understand an audience. When in your career or your volunteer work that you may have done, or in your schooling, have you done projects or sort of shown work or shown impact around sort of getting a sense for your users, getting a sense for customers, getting a sense for whatever community it is that you're working with. So I think it's really sort of pulling from whatever you've done already, whether that is paid work, unpaid work, schoolwork, like I said, and translating that into sort of this UX language. So I think it's all about how are you making things easier for the people that you're working for, the projects you've worked on. How are you working to iterate and understand them better? So how do you constantly sort of strive to change and improve in your work, in your schoolwork, et cetera? And then, how are you sort of collaborating with others to make that happen? So I think these are all sorts of big concepts that you can make smaller and think, okay, I have an example of this collaboration. I have an example of this iteration. And that's, whether it was in a UX or a tech company or not, you can still talk about it and it'll be very relevant. So these are things to not shy away from just because it wasn't at a specific kind of company, to definitely include in your LinkedIn profile and in your CV.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other panelists want to sort of jump in on this?
Well, I was thinking maybe on a portfolio. So maybe if you're a bit further on in your career and perhaps are starting to put a portfolio together with some case studies, it could be a good idea to document some of the challenges that you faced in doing that project, because whereas you might show some of the technical skills and some of the other parts of that case study, the challenges is a good opportunity to show how you handled some of the more tricky interpersonal skills or issues that might have come up.
Yeah, I completely agree with this, actually. I'd even go so far as to say that technical skills are almost a given when you're communicating on your portfolio. You sort of maybe give some examples of things you've made, some lo-fi and hi-fi things, but it feels like the more interesting client problems or whatever, interesting problems on a project that you might have encountered, it's always been soft skills that save the day. It's been how you manage people's expectations, it's how you kind of have those tricky conversations. And I found that, to me, a really useful way of communicating those soft skills is always kind of couching them within a story. We have that's like a classic storytelling framework where you have some sort of antagonist. And as we all know, in the world of UX, there's so many antagonists that we deal with. So Neil, do you have anything to jump in on this point about communicating?
I think you got it all. I think the one thing I would always suggest is if you've identified some of your soft skills, and maybe it's not something you can do directly in your role, looking for areas in the business where you can kind of do those things or spin those things up, and seeing if you can start those initiatives.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, a bit to your point, Rachel, when you were saying that if people are advanced enough in their career to come up with a portfolio, I almost think that no matter what stage you're in, even if you're a career changer and you haven't even done any UX yet, you can still communicate soft skills through like almost case studies in some sense. Like it's so easy to do volunteering or kind of even I guess hypothetical projects, like practice projects. That's very valuable to hiring managers because it's about seeing how you think, right? But actually, a couple of things. So we've got a question in the Q&A section from Emerald, and we'll get to that in a second. But I'm encouraging everyone in the crowd, just chuck in questions in the Q&A. I know that we've got this idea. Oh, thanks, Norman. That's amazing. Literally, as I said, it pops up. Brilliant. I feel like we've got a connection there. But yeah, so obviously we've got a time allocated for the end for Q&A, but if people want to feed in questions throughout, that'd be great too, and we can have it as a kind of like a free-flowing kind of thing. So yeah, let's get to Emerald's question first. And she's asking us, how do we stand out when every new UX designer, and I'd probably say old UX designer too, says that they have empathy and communicate well? So who wants to jump onto that one first?
I'm happy to take a pass at it.
Yeah.
I think that's true. the challenge is, in your portfolio, in your application, how are you going to look any different than others? I think, that's where we go to authenticity. It's like, it's really like, we were just talking about telling a story. So what's your example of that? When did you use empathy to maybe solve a problem? And I think when we're, creating a portfolio or a CV, you want to think about, how did you save time, save money, or improve a process? And if you can weave that empathy into that story that you're telling, maybe you spotted something that, a user just sort of maybe communicated in a very nuanced way, and you were able to sort of take that back to your team, improve a feature, and then, ship that out to the world to sort of do something better or more quickly or more easily. So it's really sort of, how do you weave that with the impact and tell your story? There may be 50 stories about empathy or communication, but you're the only one that's telling that story. So connecting it to the impact, I think, will make it stronger. And, don't be afraid to talk about those foundational skills as how you got there. Because it's also about that process and showing the hiring manager, the employer, that you are using those skills as part of your process, which means you can use those skills again when they hire you.
Yeah, interesting. And just to sort of probe a bit on that further, I was wondering if we have any thoughts about where is the best place to communicate this, because obviously there's the CV and then there's the portfolio. And I do think both are important. Are there any viewpoints on where these stories should live more than let's say the list of technical skills?
I think it depends. Also, go ahead.
I've definitely seen people do quite a nice summary at the top of their CV that introduces them, and you might introduce a story into that section where you're talking about yourself, and then maybe you could follow up a bit more on the portfolio where you can elaborate that and talk about it a bit more in detail, and treat the CV as the thing that makes the hiring manager want to click through and read a bit more.
Yeah, absolutely.
I see the CV as sort of, this is the end result of what I did, and the portfolio is more, these are all the challenges or the things I went through before I got to that end point.
I like that. Result versus stories.
Sorry. I think there's a delay or something. I don't know. I was just going to say, I totally agree with all those points as well. I think the CV is also becoming sort of a tick box more for recruiters and internal recruiters. So if you have it, it's great. But I think there's also other areas that we can stand out in. Whether it be posting on LinkedIn or about maybe a short brief about, like a little short post about a case study that links to your portfolio or something like that. One thing that I definitely did when I was a junior and coming up is sort of almost treat it like a branding project and treating myself as a brand that I needed to kind of highlight and stand out, more than university students coming out, because I went through a sort of a boot camp kind of thing.
Right.
So there's a different kind of thinking on that as well. But I think it's using, I guess it depends on, I guess in this case, what Emerald wants out of standing out. Is it standing out to get that first job? Is it standing out to get that promotion? Is it standing out to do something else? There's different avenues you can go down, I guess.
Yeah, really good. Treating it like a project, I think, is good. Kind of zooming in on who the key audiences are. Who's this for? And then you can talk about the language for that. I love this. And I love all the questions that are coming in. Fantastic. So we've answered the top one. There's one really good question from Norman, and actually this kind of lines up with some of the discussions we were having prior to the event about introversion and how our work is for people like that. So the question is, would you say if UX design is a difficult field for introverts? Any tips for introverts if they would like to switch to a UX design career? And I believe, Rachel, you might have something to say about this.
Yes, yeah. So I suppose sometimes we think about imposter syndrome as something that you want to overcome, but I kind of think there might be it might be more achievable, at least in the short term, like when you have those moments of imposter syndrome, when that takes hold. Like, can you actually just like manage it in that moment? And I suppose when those imposter syndrome things come along, it's kind of pointing towards something that you want, perhaps, or so maybe it's giving you an indication of what you might want to learn next. And then you treat it, okay, imposter syndrome, you've done your job, you've told me, you've given me some direction of what I might want to learn more about in future to help myself develop. And then you put it aside. It's any of those thoughts around they're not being good enough or shouldn't be there, they're not helpful, they're just thoughts. Put it aside and just focus more on the bit where it points your direction of where you might want to progress in future.
Wait, that is really interesting. I've never come across this way of thinking about imposter syndrome before. I love this. So to me, I always thought of imposter syndrome as just your own insecurities talking, you are good enough, especially, I guess as a person of color, you do get a sense sometimes of being like not at home in certain spaces. And then that's when, at least for me, I know it manifests in everyone differently. It comes up differently. But I always went to squash that feeling in myself, which maybe isn't the healthiest. But you're saying that it can be positive and that you can use it as a compass. Is that right?
Well, I think it's very difficult to squash it entirely if you're naturally predisposed to experiencing imposter syndrome. It just might be a bit more achievable to manage it that way. Maybe it goes after a long time, I don't know, but yeah, and all those, they're just thoughts, those bits that tell you that they're not real.
Not real, yeah.
Those insecurities, yeah, they're just thoughts, not real.
Fantastic. Well, any other points from the panelists about introversion, UX, and also imposter syndrome? Is there any more stuff there?
I had a little point about imposter syndrome. There's it's something I go through every day. I think I'm rubbish every day. But there's and I think it's something I think we all go through as designers, and it is always in your head, even when you're doing events. One thing I read recently is in a book by Sonke Ahrens. It's like How to Take Smart Notes. It's a great book.
Great book.
Great book. And there's a line in there where he talks about imposter syndrome, and he talks about basically if you're experiencing imposter syndrome, it basically just means you care about what you do and with things you're outputting, and you're nervous about maybe what you're outputting because you care about it so much. So when you start thinking of it from that angle, reframe that in that angle, you kind of go, oh, I think I'm rubbish because I care about this. So I'm going to keep doing it. I'm going to keep getting better at it. I'm going to keep, progressing and learning and learning and learning. If you almost don't get imposter syndrome, it's the opposite. Maybe you need to care about it a bit more. So that was just a little take from his book, not my thoughts, but it helped me a lot whenever I think about imposter syndrome.
Yeah, really. I mean, he's a very influential figure in the kind of building a second brain community, which I've written an article about. I'm going to plug myself in the chat. Cool. Okay. That's super interesting. Let's jump back. I mean, we're getting so many questions and we don't even need to stay in our own kind of conversation areas. We can just sort of answer these people. Okay, BB has asked, how can we present with impact to stakeholders while still balancing empathy for users? Sometimes stakeholders care more about the bottom line. Interesting. Actually, I'm going to kind of jump in on this one before handing it over to the rest of you. I kind of feel like part of our role as people in UX, I think, and particularly in user research, is we are advocates for the user and advocates for people. I sometimes see it as quite an important role, and I'm sure you've experienced this in research processes. We're often trying to find pain points. We're often trying to discover where people are hurting in their experiences, and then when they can kind of give that over to us, it's kind of trust that they've have in us. So we sort of owe it to them to sort of defend them in a sense. It's probably quite a highfalutin way of talking about it, and probably sound ridiculous, but I do care a lot about the people that I'm designing for and building for. So yeah, I tend to fall on that side. But the way to manage those conversations for me is to kind of build that up throughout the process, so that all the stakeholders know that that's the role I'm going to take. Then kind of they know that I'm the voice of the user in the room. That's how I've gone about it. Who else wants to jump in? Rachel, you're nodding as if you agree.
Oh, no, I was nodding to what you were saying, but yeah, I think that's a really good point. Help the other people in the room build empathy with the users and everything you've learned about the users and about their pain points. But it can work both ways as well. The stakeholders, the people that you work with, if you build empathy for them and what matters to them as well, I think that can help manage those conflicting, I guess, feelings in those moments as well.
I'll definitely add to that as well. Great points on that. I would say, we can definitely present back, what our users are going through. So I you hear it on probably every single UX talk is, show some testing, show that we've tested this out, show what users are saying in the user interviews, play that back for stakeholders. But the other side of it is also translating what you're saying into the language that stakeholders speak in. So that stakeholder may need to present back to their stakeholder, which is a bottom line stakeholder potentially, right? So if we can make their job easier by putting our conversation into their language, where we're getting that stakeholder on side, and then next time we have that conversation, it's so much easier.
Yeah, language is so important. My background's anthropology, and a big part of the way in which we do anthropology is often we learn to speak the language. And that doesn't mean the language even in terms of the actual kind of spoken language, but it's more about their ways of labeling concepts. That's a very important thing, to be on the same page, to come to terms. Rebecca, anything on this before we move on?
Yeah, just to say that I think that empathy for users and the bottom line are often very much connected. So often it is something that you can frame in terms of a bottom line. This will increase revenue. This will save us this amount of time or money. But the reasoning behind it is that users are, we are getting all this feedback saying this is difficult, or we're getting feedback about A, B, or C. And so I think ideally you can frame what you've learned, but then tell them how it's going to save money, which is often the thing you need to talk about as well.
It all comes down to the money. It's very true. Great. Guys, thanks for all the great questions. There's another one here, and we've already got a discussion around it. So this is a spicy topic. So Prachi, excuse me if I've got that wrong, Prachi asks, or says, there is always a discussion around using storytelling, but I often find myself struggling with the entire concept. Could you provide tips or how to approach the same? Wow, okay, that's very big. And, storytelling is, I think, such a key soft skill. If, I didn't answer the question earlier, but to me, I would say that storytelling for me is the biggest soft skill. But yeah, who wants to talk about this?
I see there's already some good advice in here. Someone mentions using the STAR method: situation, task, action, and result. You could even simplify that. What I do in portfolios is, the who, the challenge, and then what happened to solve it. So I think Mooj, you mentioned this earlier. There's like the protagonist and something, there's a conflict that happens. And so it's always talking about the problem and then what you did. And it doesn't have to be, flowery like a novel. I wouldn't worry too much about the words you're using. You want to make this clear. Your portfolio is a UX project in and of itself. So it's really telling what the problem was and how you fixed it, whatever steps that took. And it's actually better to talk about. Sometimes I know so many hiring managers who have said, I'd much rather you say how you tripped up and how something was so difficult, or how you tried something but it was a mistake. because everyone's used to seeing like the perfect UX stories of how everything went well and everything happened exactly as planned. But you actually do stand out. We're talking about standing out earlier when you say, hey, I tried this and it totally flopped, but here's what I learned for next time. So yeah, that's a story. That's a story in and of itself. A story doesn't have to be this big thing.
Yeah. Anyone else wants to jump in on that? That's a great answer.
I think quotes are quite powerful storytellers. They bring in the emotive part without the language going too flowery, like you mentioned just now. So I tend to use that in presentations and on my portfolio, actually. There's always a place for a quote.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I think everything was covered right there. It's storytelling is so expansive on what you can do. There's entire talks just about storytelling. I think the one thing I would add is probably sharing some data if you're allowed to share data, obviously, where it started. So like why a project was spun up in the first place. So was conversion down? Were we not making? Did we lose X amount of users, etc. And then where you went to by the end of the project, whether it was success or failure, and then what you would want to achieve beyond that.
Exactly. Love that. I would just add one thing, which I think speaks across what both Rebecca and Rachel were saying. So I always try and think of like, where is the human? Is the human coming through in the story I'm telling? And then, yeah, I see Randy had some comments about the STAR method, and he said that it might not be suitable for different types of story. And I would say it depends. It depends on the length of the story. It depends on where it is. Absolutely, all that stuff. But as long as the human being is coming through, and then the way to do that is to bring in quotes, is to bring in images, is to find ways to kind of flesh it out. So I think it's all kind of part of the same whole. But it's such a deep subject. It probably deserves its own event. Rosie, take notes. Nice. Cool. So let's move on to the next one. Emerald, you've already asked a question. I'll come back to you. But let's jump to Vasuki first. So Vasuki asks, how can I effectively communicate to business stakeholders that implement a feature solely to compete with competitors, and it may compromise the application's usability? It's a tough one. It's just okay. Let me play it back and see if I understood it. So basically, you're after understanding. You're trying to tell your stakeholders that by building something, it's going to break the application or make it much harder to use. Is that right? So to me, that feels like that's what I would use for that is something called reframing. So basically, you're reframing what they think the problem is into slightly different language. And in doing so, it's a way to lead them down this kind of path of understanding that maybe they have the wrong idea and they're looking at things the wrong way. So an advantage that people have in the world of UX is that we are able to sort of zoom out a little bit and we consider the role of the user, the role of the human. And then often the people with more sort of business-minded goals have very specific things they want. And then this seems to be about building something to tackle a competitor, maybe draw away market share or sort of mind share away from a competitor's product. But what we need to do is reframe that and say that, well, actually, what we're doing there is actually there's an opportunity cost. By damaging our own reputation, our own product, we're actually going to lose overall. So I would suggest it's a way of reframing. Anyone else on the panel wants to sort of jump in on this?
I'll jump in on that. I'd say that's absolutely true, but there's the other side of the coin where sometimes a business needs to do tactical things to be still a business, and you kind of have to sometimes do this kind of work. What you can do to make sure you're putting great input in there and good work is to like I said before, is to kind of show those interviews with users to kind of demonstrate what users are going to potentially have to go through because the business may not see that. They're seeing it with blinders on potentially. They're seeing it from business perspective. There's a lot of pressure on them to stay a business, depending on what size of business they are, or to stay in their job, or etc. So it's showing what users would have to go through in order to, well, if that happened, and maybe some alternatives that still achieve the business goal, but would be a better solution for users. So there has to be, in this scenario, potentially, there needs to be a bit of a compromise.
Nice, love it. Yeah, compromise, a very important skill. Anyone else wants to jump in on this? I think we can almost maybe, yeah, there's a direction we can go in based on this in a second. But yeah, who wants to take another swing at this? We good? Okay, cool. Well, I was wondering, just to your point about that particular question. I had an experience advising a very large social media company about changes they were making to their feed. They were changing it to being a more algorithmic feed and copying a main competitor of theirs. And that involved a lot of research out in LA with influencers, where the majority of their kind of customer base is. And we got unanimously, everyone said, no, this is going to be terrible. No, keep it the way it is, all that stuff. And all of our sacrificial concepts that we were presenting with people, everyone hated it. And no matter how much we tried, we had the most kind of, nuanced and delicately way of saying, please guys, don't do this. They did it anyway. So there's a limit with this. I think part of it is understanding your role and the limits of your power. And often UX decisions are just overrun from top down, big dogs. And in this case, it was the head of the product, or head of the company himself. He was like, no, we're doing this. And then sure enough, he walked it back a month later, and it was a shit show. So Vasuki, I would say, do your best, but there's a limit to what we can do in this profession. Cool. Okay, kind of jumping on that. There's a great question here by Georgiara, who says, how can we skeptical stakeholders be more collaborative when it comes to creating design solutions? I love this question. This question is not coming from a UX insider, but for someone who is a skeptical stakeholder. Who wants to take a swing at this?
I think there is a correction. How can we make skeptical stakeholders be more collaborative when it comes?
Okay. I see.
Which makes sense.
That makes sense.
When it comes to creating design solutions, I think ultimately, I hate to be a broken record, but I think it is talking about the impact on the business. So I think our role is constantly framing things that would be better for users, but also in a way where it'll be a win for the business as well. So I think this is how to calm the skeptics with data, like Sunil mentioned earlier. We're showing that this is going in this direction. This will change it. Any data that you can have, whether it's talking to 5 users from user interviews that have all said some similar things, or maybe it's getting information from competitor analysis, whatever it is, and then kind of steering the conversation in that direction. There's always going to be skeptical stakeholders. I think that's definitely knowing how to navigate those conversations is definitely one of the foundational skills that you'll use almost every day at work.
Yeah, absolutely. Rachel, do you have anything to add there?
I was only thinking, if the skeptical stakeholder is trying to jump to solutions a bit too early, maybe a good technique can be to take a step back and challenge them to make sure we understand the problem space thoroughly first before jumping to solutions, and that might help sort of draw it back a little bit more. So that you can have that collaborative, that chance to be collaborative.
Yes. Cool. So Neil, anything to add before we keep moving?
Yeah, I'd add that, and I absolutely agree on both those points with Rachel and Rebecca. One thing I'd add as well is if it's possible to do a workshop, that always helps.
Oh yeah.
Well, maybe not always, but it can help to bring that stakeholder in and see a creative kind of flow and be involved in that. I've done that before and I got lucky enough to get a finance director in that was very skeptical about spending time designing, and we just got them to sketch, and they loved it. And after that workshop, they were our biggest backers. So I think sometimes bringing them into Crazy Eights and drawing sometimes really helps. Letting them be heard in a creative manner.
Yeah. I completely agree with that, Sunil. I can illustrate with a story actually. So I was working for this company, it's a big password managing company, and they had gotten to a certain point in their journey where they were huge and very well respected by nerds, by people who were understanding the kind of the excellence of their password managing technology. But to the average person, we just didn't understand why that technology was better than something else. So we were actually helping them create these personas, which is obviously very common tool used in the world of design. They'd never used any personas or any user data because they were just designing for themselves. And we met with a lot of pushback, and our client was very junior. She was the only UX professional really in that part of the business, reporting directly to a C-level person who wasn't interested in what she was doing. And then the way we had to manage that was by getting all the designers in all the engineers in a workshop and getting them to sort of to actually crack on and have a go at designing for people that they didn't know about. And they were like, oh, wow, this is really tricky. And then we were able to reveal more and more information, show them the value of a persona in this kind of work. So yeah, hands-on, gently show them that they're kind of in the wrong situation, and that can be very powerful. Interesting. There's a question here from Alice Williamy, who I think I've met. I think you were visiting Oxford many years ago, and whatever, separate thing. How do you represent the user on projects where there is limited/no budget for interviews and testing? This is a great question. Budgets are shrinking more and more, I guess, right? Especially in big tech companies and the waves of layoffs that have been going on. What does the panel feel about this?
Yeah, I came from the world of charities, nonprofits, and universities. So it's sort of a very common refrain as far as not having enough funding to do some user research or to compensate for that. I would say a couple of things you could rely on are competitor research. So seeing sort of trends of what others out there are doing, and that, maybe relying on some of their user research to say, hey, there's in this industry, it's really going in this direction. Maybe we want to sort of look into this as well. What's called hallway research, which is maybe talking to some people in your company, but that aren't, working in UX or, maybe on different teams to get an outside perspective and to sort of tally up some of that feedback and insight you can get from them. Hallway research you can even do with friends, family. I find especially if you maybe have an older family member, that's a great person to sort of test the UX of your website or your app. Somebody that maybe isn't a digital native can give you such great insight into assumptions you might have made when you're designing something. And so, yeah, it's really just kind of getting crafty and creative with other ways to get opinions that might not be sort of that big paid research project or effort.
Love it. Yeah. Hallway research, we'd call it guerrilla research, but I think that has like slightly warlike undertones. So hallways nicer. Any more answers on this? Rachel, you're nodding again. Just so you know, every time you're nodding, I will pick on you.
Okay, I second all those things that Rebecca just said, and agree that as long as you're learning, that's good. Like, find ways to learn. like have a look on the internet. I've used things like forums before to see what people are talk about their pain points. People love to complain on forums, so that's actually been quite a useful place to find out information. I've used things like blogs where people talk about what their a day in the life of a particular job might be. Looking at reviews on competitors' apps, looking for pain points there. So I've used all sorts of techniques to looking on the internet to see what I can learn. You often don't know what you're going to learn until you stumble across something kind of useful. And you're like, oh, good, I'm glad I looked there.
I love that. I also love the term hallway research. It's the first time I heard that. It's so much nicer than guerrilla research as well. I love that. I'd share a quick one about a startup I was at. We had the same scenario. We didn't have funding for any research. I had to find out sort of the day in life of estate agents. And thankfully on YouTube, they post videos of their onboarding. So I watched all their onboardings, which is great because that's what's used to train them. So I got to know their every day in terms of that. So I didn't have any resource to even go out and interview people. So just watching their onboarding videos actually helped a lot get me in the right mindset for that. And in terms of testing, I guess it depends on where your users are, but ours were all around us in parks and stuff at lunchtime in the summer. So we just rock up to groups of people in the park in summer, very specifically to London and the rest of the UK. We'll just go to the parks for lunch, and going up to groups of people and say, "Hey, sorry to disturb your lunch. We're testing this new app. Any chance you could spend like a minute or two with me just to go through things? I'll buy you lunch, or I'll buy you a can of Coke or something like that." And that was really effective, just to do some quick tests. We even did paper prototyping for that as well.
Yeah, paper prototypes, big fan. And actually, that's a big part of soft skills. Actually, is showing people the value of lower res research and design. As people in the world of UX, we very often understand that you're kind of having an MVP. You're kind of just having a few sketches. You're trying to get stuff out there and test and learn and iterate. But very often people might think that they're on board with this. Senior stakeholders might be like, yeah, okay, sure, whatever. But still, they want to see a bit more spit and polish, as it were. And that can be quite hard to manage. And it tends to require later nights working harder to make things look nicer when they shouldn't have to. But sadly, it's a kind of a sad reality of the space. So just be warned. Jumping back into the questions, we've got a good one here from Sumaira Hassan, and she's asking, what are the key soft skills required to step into UX leadership? So I think that's a good one, because it feels like there is a kind of, at least for me, there is a kind of a step up that you need to kind of contend with. Who wants to jump in here? I can see Rachel stopping herself and nodding. No, that didn't count as a nod. You stopped yourself. So Neil, should I put you on the spot?
I'm waiting too. I want to get to leadership, but I think it depends on what someone defines leadership. Is it a lead role? Is it as in a lead UX or head of UX, or is it leading just as a designer in your company and just kind of talking about design and leading from the front on that? So I guess it depends on where the question is coming from. Is it to attain that position, or is it to lead UX in your profession, in your career, in that company? Not really an answer. It's more like a question.
The best answers are just more questions. Certainly in the world of consulting, the best answers are the ones that give rise to more questions and then hopefully follow-on projects. Okay, who else wants to jump in on the leadership question?
I'm going to go back to my original most important soft skill of listening. I think that becomes quite important, maybe at a different level. Maybe if you're junior or mid, or you might be listening to users in UX research sessions or listening to developers. But I think maybe as you step up into leadership, it becomes quite important to listen to the team around you and actively listen to the team around you and understand the temperature of what's going on and what matters to people. And when someone comes to you with a problem, to really listen to and understand and empathize with them before jumping in with a solution.
Yep, no, completely agree. Rosie, you've jumped on stage. Everything good?
Everything's fantastic. We've just moved, we've kind of been doing a Q&A throughout, which I've been loving, but this is the official Q&A section. So I'm just going to hop on and read some questions out for you, Mooj, and then everybody gets a chance to sort of answer equally. So if that's okay, I'm going to take over a little bit. So we've got this question that's been on the top of the votes for a while, which obviously is a hot topic at the moment. Is UX writing or UI designing threatened by AI advances? How are junior/senior designers feeling about these new technological innovations and tools? What should aspiring UX designers prepare for? Not exactly soft skill related, but definitely industry related. So I wonder how people want to answer that directly related to the question and whether they feel like AI may have a space within soft skills as well. I'm going to add on to it.
Yeah, I'd love to jump on here if that's okay. So I almost think that question, it really showcases how soft skills are going to become even more important than hard skills right now, because so much of the hard skills, at least aspects of them, will be, an AI thing. In terms of junior people, so a big part of how I've always worked with juniors is they would take the first draft of something, whether it's a prototype, a discussion guide, whatever it might be. They would do the first draft, and then we'd work together on them, and then the edits I would make on that draft would be instructive. And unfortunately, I do believe that way of teaching is going to go, because I'm happily employed right now, but what if I was to leave Stripe Partners and start my own business? Would I be looking to hire a junior in the next kind of few years? Probably not, because that kind of initial first draft thing will be taken care of in a rough and ready way by AI tools. But I think this is where soft skills become even more important, because it's about how to sell an idea in, how to kind of get really good data from research, how to give context around a design. I think this all becomes super important, and I think that's maybe where people should start thinking about arranging their stories and their portfolio in those kinds of areas. Yeah, I would love it if someone disagreed with me. Let's get some sort of fights going on. I think that's always interesting.
Anyone else would like to hop on that?
I think she specifically called out UX writing. And so as a content designer, I just wanted to say that, I think it's something to keep your eye on. It's something to learn about. It's something to practice. But I wouldn't sort of get up in arms with it just yet. We still have to see where it's going. If nothing else, there will need to be people that will use the AI to help us with our work. And so it's really more about becoming comfortable with the tool versus the tool taking over your entire job, and sort of how to leverage it in your work. I can speak personally. I've used it a bit here and there, but it's not something I'm using on a daily basis. And it's also wait and see, what our company's policies will be on this, what any rules, regulations, and laws around the ethics of where and when we can use it, what information we can put into things like ChatGPT as far as privacy and confidential business information. So I think it's still too soon to panic about it, I guess, would be how I would summarize this.
Anybody else want to hop in, or do we feel that's been answered? Great. Go on to the next one. There's one here that I thought was really good. Do you have any tips for dealing with managers / leads / leadership execs who take professional soft skills for granted, but don't want us to spend any time or money honing those skills?
Oh, that's a great one. I can start this one off. That's all right. So I had an ambition a long time ago to do public speaking and be on events and things, and no one at the company wanted to support any of that. It's something I did separately. It's something I did outside of that, after work, at lunchtimes, etc. I think if you've got something like that, and this is very specific, I guess, in this case, if it's something you want to do, and your business doesn't support it, and you can still do it without impacting that business or going against the business in any kind of way, don't do that. Then there's always an avenue to go to. There's also talking to mentors as well. I was lucky enough that there were colleagues in the UX industry that were doing things like that I wanted to do. So asking the questions, how did you get into that? Can I tag along? In this case, it's something physical, I guess, but it's asking the question, asking for help. If it's something you can't do at the company, and I guess if it goes really far and it's something you definitely can't do, maybe that's a signifier to move to another company that does enable you to do the things you want to do.
I totally agree with that. I would just add, if there's a particular conference or course, I would contact the organizers directly and just to say, hey, do you offer scholarships? My employer isn't supporting me on this. What sorts of discounts or, any free passes that you have available? Sometimes they will have allocated that already. And so you can sort of get on the list for that, or maybe, sort of benefit from that. So it's always worth asking, always, always.
I would say something additional to this. I think it's much harder to demonstrate proof of getting good at a soft skill. I think employers generally tend to be more ready to invest in your hard skills, your technical skills, whatever they are, put you on a design course or prototyping course or whatever it is, a research boot camp. But this is the tricky thing about soft skills. They almost sort of emerge from practice, from daily interactions with people. And I don't think that I don't think you can just put someone on a course to be a good communicator and they will be a good communicator. I think it's about teaching people some strategies, but then they have to do a certain amount of, there's just, some experience they need to go through to do that. So Randy, I totally think, it does leave people off the hook, according to your question, but I can't really think of another way forward. I almost think we need to kind of hustle around it. One more point there is I think there's some politics around the way in which you ask to be upskilled. And I feel like if you're asking to be upskilled on soft skills, it can signal in certain situations that you want to jump up a few rungs. Like it's like, okay, I'm ready to be a leader kind of thing. I'm ready to be the guy or whatever it is. So it's a case of, I think, managing that and kind of, again, I think to Rachel's point, listening and being aware and just being very conscious of the environment you're in.
Amazing. Anybody else want to add to that? No, I feel like we've answered that. I would love some other book recommendations if you have any that's had a real impact on your career. I feel like this can be design related or personal development related. So please give us your racks.
I've got a quick one, which is been very helpful to me, and is a bit of a weird one. It's a book on negotiation by a guy called Chris Voss, who was an FBI negotiator. I think it's called Never Split the Difference. But it was an interesting book. It taught me some techniques, but also it made the idea of negotiating being fun. And then I was always like trying to negotiate everything. I try to negotiate my rent, try to negotiate, pay at work and everything. And it made me not fear having tricky conversations, and it made it sound fun. And because all the stories in the book are from really cool kind of FBI negotiation events, it's better than a typical business book, I think. So yeah. Chris Voss, Never Split the Difference.
I would second that. Like, I think he had a class on masterclass, and I watched that. That's a really good one. Also, Bob Woodward had a really good one um, on journalism that I used to go through to prep for events and things like that. I had a couple of books while I'm talking anyway. So one is Sonke Arons, how to take smart notes. And a favorite of mine that is from retail days is Dream Manager. And I've forgotten the author, but it's a great book. And it's all about enabling your people to do good things in their life as a manager, even if that means leaving the company.
Speaking of books about being a manager, there's Making of a Manager by Julie Zhu. That's very good as well. That might help the person who's looking to step up into leadership. And if you don't want to spend money on a book, she publishes quite a lot on Medium as well. So she's worth looking up. She was an early designer at Facebook in the very early days and quickly became a manager. And so it's a lot of her learnings along the way. But yeah, even the posts she puts on Medium aren't necessarily managerial related. So I think they can be quite accessible to a lot of people in the UX industry.
Rebecca, did you have any books you want to put forward?
No, I would just plus one sort of the Medium as a really good source, I think, for design related topics. It's really sort of bite size and a place to get some sort of thoughts and ideas about things you might be considering and kind of hearing other people sound off and describe their own work experiences.
Awesome, great. Thanks, people. Next question. This was not by me, but I just put it in here. So Alice asked,
I think we've actually
you've
answered
this.
Yeah,
okay, awesome, thank you. Next one. How do you... Right, this is not dyslexic friendly, sorry. What do you do if you do not have direct contact with users? Quite the hardship in the medical industry. Got there in the end. Thoughts?
No, this is very important. We're doing this. I mean, right now, my company, we've just been working more and more with a particular healthcare client, and we're experiencing this recently. And it's about really carefully balancing, at least for us, the research question to be around finding patients maybe with similar afflictions. It's hard to say without giving the game away in the specifics, so bear with me. It's an issue around, let's say there's a very particular niche disease or affliction. It might be hard to recruit for these people. So we need to make the case and design the research so we can get a lot out of very few people and then combine that quite strategically with experts. So make sure there's plenty of budget in the project for some like really top dollar, really solid experts to bring in, and then try to make it as interactive as possible. You're not going to be able to do a really kind of wide-ranging research piece when it comes to the medical sphere because of the data protection. So you need to kind of find ways to break the project into chunks, constantly go back and forth between your stakeholders and designers and try and like build loads of things. That's ultimately what I would suggest. Sorry for not being more specific, but we can't talk too much about what's going on right now.
Did anybody want to touch on that, or do they feel like Mooch has adequately? Awesome. We have about time for one more question. So I'm going to pick this one because I think it's probably most relevant. What are some other ways to express your individuality and soft skills outside of your case studies, cover letter, resume, and emails in the earlier stages of job hunting? Big one.
Yeah, I would say off the top of my head, someone mentioned LinkedIn posts earlier. So that could go for any kind of post. Like if you are a blogger, you enjoy that sort of thing. If you post on Twitter, things like that. That's one way to kind of express sort of just your thoughts and opinions and kind of the way that you approach work or the way that you approach life even really kind of goes towards personal branding like Sunil was mentioning earlier. Yeah, I had one other and then now I just forgot what it was. So I'll let anyone else.
Okay, it's very fun. I do that all the time. Mooch, I feel like you're burning to speak, so go for it.
I'd like to just plus one on writing. It's something I've been trying to do more. Write more, post more, get involved. The personal brand is important, but also I feel like people are quite forgiving of if you change your personal brand, or especially the next generation, there is less this sense of fixity. I think, myself as a millennial, we tend to assume that what we put out there, we're going to be judged for forever, And my own manager, he's been pushing me to write more, get out there. That's why I'm doing this sort of thing. Is even if I'm not 100% there yet, we're all works in progress. And then if we show people that journey, that's very powerful. And then to the point about content creators or whatever, like YouTubers or influencers, a lot of the value that their audiences get from them is seeing how they've grown. And there's almost a sense of vicarious fulfillment. So if you were to be just kind of vocal and open about your journey and vulnerable of I'm transitioning to UX, here's what I'm doing, people will support you. And it's a cool thing to see.
I was going to say really quick, networking and events is another way where you can sort of express and get to know others in the industry and really just have real conversations with people and ask questions. There was a question about being an introvert earlier. My advice to all introverts, I can be introverted sometimes, is if you can't think of anything to say, ask a question. And so this is how you start to develop these relationships and have people understand you and your personality and what you're interested in, what kind of work you might like to do, all these things. Meetup events like Tech Circus, I sure does. In person, online, they all work.
We do in person in London. So if anybody's based there, they're welcome to come along. Anybody else want to touch on that? Other sort of skills that they can highlight or ways that they can highlight their soft skills?
Yeah, I think it's about communicating in the way that feels most comfortable to you. So if writing doesn't feel like the way you want to be putting your content out into the world, you can make some videos, or it could be YouTube, it could be on Instagram or something, whatever feels like best for you. And I think it's great to be showcasing that even at the entry stage of your career, because you're probably helping somebody else who's maybe a step behind and is hoping to get into the industry and wants to see what your journey has been like. You're always going to be helping someone if you tell your story.
Absolutely, second a lot of those points there. I wanted to come back to the event bit because I guess that's why I know a little bit better. I would definitely say going, obviously now we've got so many online events you can go to. It doesn't have to be just UX. It could be product specific. It could be completely out of the realm of what you're doing. And just being able to talk to other UX designers, or maybe just being the only UX designer on it, might be quite interesting. The other thing I would say is also connecting with other people in the chat is a big thing, because they're probably at the same level you are, or maybe they're further on, or maybe they're behind you. Making that connection with those people. If we can't do it in person, we can do it on the chat. And on top of it, everyone in this chat's pretty international. I saw LA and London, and I think India was in there as well. So connecting with people is the best way to do it. Just an example of this, I connected with someone on a lunchtime talk, I think maybe about 2 years ago. And we were talking about sandwiches, of all things, on a UX. The UX talk was going on, and on the chat, we were messaging each other about our lunch. And we found out we're both foodies. All we do is talk about food. And then every once in a while, we vent about UX work. And it's the best. Really good mates. And we just chat all the time about food and UX events and UX just stuff in our head. That really helps to get you where you need to go, but also helps you kind of just calm down sometimes. So yeah.
I think that's a really good point. I never thought growing up that video games would be like one of the best soft skills that I have, because it literally connects me with so many people in this industry, and it's something common to talk about and people like love it. So if I could give any advice, it would be like to really get involved in your hobbies and don't be afraid to share what you're really passionate about, because likelihood is that someone else in your community is also really passionate about that, and somebody in leadership as well. So yeah, that's all the time we have for today. So if anybody has some final words or final comments that they want to put across, now's the time. Mooj, do you have anything you wanted to like add before we end?
Well, ultimately, I think what I was saying earlier about soft skills being, I think, harder than hard skills to just learn immediately. See it as something that you're developing, but try and have fun with it. I think my example of negotiating was quite a good one for me, because I was never very good at sort of like negotiating. I'd get emotional, I'd get like upset. I would see it as being or I trying to like win arguments, you know. I used to be in debating at school. I'm a nerd, okay? Then at uni as well, I did a bit of debating, and it's just, I saw it as like a victory, like I need to win. But then I learned this new approach to negotiation, which was much more about conversation and empathy. That's the kind of heart of that Chris Voss book. And then I started putting it into practice, and I didn't get it straight away. But then I was able to get better and better. And now I think it's one of my strongest skills, is negotiating in a way that everyone feels like they've won. So yeah, be patient with yourself. Soft skills are hard to acquire, I think, but they can make such big impacts further down the line.
Rebecca, did you have any sort of last thoughts or any recommendations you wanted to end with?
Yeah, I mean, just +1 to everything Mooj was just saying. I mean, these are not just for work, these skills that we're talking about today. These are life skills that we use in every single interpersonal relationship that we're in. And you get feedback from people. Ask them, you know, what do you think? What do you think I'm good at? What do you think I can work on? You know, and this is just, we're all a work in progress, and this is kind of how we can identify places that we can focus on, and things we can really highlight and leverage in our lives, and kind of make all these interpersonal relationships flow a little bit more smoothly.
Thank you for that. Rachel, did you have anything you wanted to end on, whether it's some advice or a quote or another recommendation? But yeah, any thoughts?
I'm thinking you don't have to be great at absolutely every soft skill. I think it's probably more about recognizing your strengths, and you can like focus a lot of effort onto just developing the strengths, really. Like, I don't know, maybe if you don't particularly like speaking and presenting, like maybe you can enhance your written skills as well, if that's of interest to you. If you enjoy that part and that gives you energy, then really work on those parts. So yeah, I think for everything where there's a something that you don't like, is there an inverse? Like, look and see if there's an inverse that gives you energy and that is a strength, and you'd like to do that. You can work on doing better on that.
I think that's a really good point. My Instagram handle is Jack of all trades, because the full quote is like, a jack of all trades is better than a master of one, which I think is like, oh, there we go. We love it, Sunil. Speaking of which, any final thoughts you want to end on, Sunil?
I just had that on the side there. It says Jack of all trades, master of some. I love it. +1 to all the points here. I would say, you know, like I said before, connect with each other in the chat, with each other, like just colleagues in general. But also feel free. Hopefully, I'm speaking for everyone. Connect with us on LinkedIn, etc. And specifically for me, if you want to have a call and chat about anything, or if we're both in London, let's have a coffee or a beer.
Awesome. Well, a round of applause, if we can get some applause in the emojis for all our speakers, because they've done a wonderful job. And I can already see in the chat that loads of people have given some amazing feedback. So just thank you so much for joining me today. And thank you also to the attendees for coming. I appreciate you all being here. And that's it for today. So I'll see you all on the flip side. Bye.